Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. Hugh.
Okay.
Hugh, feel free to share, starting right at the beginning, if you don't mind.
Okay. Well, where this all started. So I wasn't really ever into Sasquatch. You know, I was always open-minded to the existence of Sasquatch because I've had some really strange experiences in my life that kind of opened my mind to just about anything is possible, I guess, after you've seen some I've seen. But I had all the same doubts with Sasquatch, you know, that everybody has, like, oh, nobody's ever killed one. You know, all the people in the woods now with game cameras and blah, blah, blah. But I was open-minded Sasquatch, and I've always been entertained by the cryptid stuff on YouTube and what have you. So I was watching the Sasquatch stuff on YouTube and just started getting fed more and more Sasquatch stuff. And then I came across Todd Standing's work of the photographs of their faces, you know, and I had to wonder, you know, is this legit, you know, and the more I dug into Todd Standing, the more I started to think maybe these are the real deal, man. Maybe this guy did capture actual faces of Sasquatch. So that was kind of where my head was as I was planning this trip to the mountains to do mining for geodes and, you know, crystals and agates. There's a spot deep in the mountains right by the Oregon-Washington border near the coast. And it's just a place friends and I go and dig for rocks. We're just kind of rock hounds, just hobby amateur rock hounds. And so I was up there and I was all alone this day. My dad and my son had been up there earlier, but they left because they didn't want to sit there and watch me run power tools and break rocks for hours, you know. So I was up there alone and just got kind of burned out on what I was doing, struggling to get this rock out. I spent hours trying to get this rock out, and that rock is still there. And the thought of Sasquatch was in the back of my mind, like kept coming up, you know, just thinking about Sasquatch from all this stuff I'd been watching prior to coming up. And so I said, screw this. I'm going to climb up to that viewpoint up there and I'm going to see if I can find a Sasquatch, you know, just to take a break, just curiosity, just boredom, whatever, you know, but just this weird thought, like, I'm going to go up there and just see if I can find one. Never expecting to actually find one, you know, it was just this weird whim. And so I knew, you know, on the way up, climbing up there, I would stop and look for rocks and dig around. And so I had a tool in my hand and, you know, I was climbing the hill, flipping rocks over, digging through the gravel, digging through the dirt. And it's kind of a steep embankment that goes up out of this sort of rock quarry crater in the side of the mountain. And so I climbed up there, you know, it's about 40 feet elevation gain, spaced out over, you know, 30, 40, 50 yards or something. Not some crazy climb by any means, but kind of steep and kind of treacherous. And then at the very top, you're on this cliff that looks down into this valley. So it's a cool viewpoint. You could see mountains and rivers, and you can see a lot from up there. And so I climb up there, and I get to the very top, and I'm scanning the valley for, I'm talking a matter of seconds. Like I hadn't spent any time up there, and I'm looking at something, and I'm laughing in my head like, oh, that's funny. There's a Sasquatch right there. Thinking it was a shadow, a stump, thinking it was, you know, something that just resembled a Sasquatch. And I'm staring at it. And I mean, it was just like, I was dumbfounded as I start seeing this thing walk, and I'm just like, what am I looking at? And, I've seen bears more times than I can count in the woods, and I have really good eyesight. I've as good as anybody can have eyesight. And I just immediately knew what I was looking at. It wasn't a bear. It definitely wasn't a person. This valley is really rural, really inaccessible. And I later learned firsthand just how hard it is to get into this valley. And so I'm watching this thing walk and just like taking a casual stroll through these little trees, like Christmas tree size trees that had been replanted from logging. And I'm just shocked, staring at this thing, just questioning my sanity. Like, I mean, who says I'm going to climb up to a viewpoint and see if I can spot a Sasquatch? And then they go, and then within seconds they're staring at one. I mean, it was just so bizarre, so freaking bizarre. And so I'm watching this thing walk, and immediately I'm digging for my cell phone. Nothing but rocks. All my pockets are full of rocks from climbing up there. You tend to just pick up anything that might be something cool when you're a rock hounder. At least that's the way I do it. I wash them later and decide if this is worth keeping. But as you're hunting, you just kind of grab them. If they look like they have possibilities of being something cool, you grab them. And so my pockets were stuffed with rocks. And, no phone. Realized my phone's in my truck. And I could see my truck from where I was at. It was back down at the bottom of this cliff I just climbed. And then it was about, I don't know, 50 yards across this gravel lot, parked over at the spot where I was initially drilling and trying to get that rock out. And so I didn't know what to do because I'm staring at a Sasquatch, don't have my phone, don't have a camera on me. And I didn't know. So I'm just completely like unsure what I should do here. Should I run and fetch the phone? Should I just stay here and watch this thing? And I've had some incidents in the past that I wasn't able to capture on film that have just haunted me for years, that I screwed those up and didn't capture. And so it's like, no way. What's the point of even staring at this thing if I can't prove it? Nobody's going to believe me. So I just bombed down this hill, jumping, skipping, falling, tripping, hit the asphalt or the gravel, and just beeline in a sprint straight to my truck, open the door, get the phone. I turned to start running, but then I realized I got all these freaking rocks in my pockets and they're just slowing me down. And so I empty all the rocks out of the pocket, then sprint back across this thing, climb up the cliff, as fast as I could, get back to my position. And immediately I'm looking, I can't find it, and I'm just, oh no, it's gone. And that was pretty, my heart sank when I realized I might have screwed up by taking my eyes off of this thing. But then I found it. Then I saw this little black speck down there, and it had changed because it wasn't walking anymore. I couldn't tell if it was sitting, kneeling, or what, but it was definitely it because I could see the movement, and got my phone out and started filming it. And you can even see on that video, click film, like you can hear me just dying out of breath from the run and the climb that I just did. And I film it for a while, but it's at a distance where this phone just didn't zoom in very well. It's not great footage. It's not even good footage, but it's footage. And so I just sat there filming it. I moved around a little bit, filmed it from different perspectives, but what kept happening, because I was so high up, that these clouds are constantly coming in. This area is a constant struggle with clouds and fog. It's just, they come and they go, they come and they go. It'll be super foggy, and then 10 minutes later, it's not foggy. Then, the clouds will go up and you'll be underneath them, and then the clouds will drop below you and you'll be above them. It'll be blue skies and sunny, but you'll look across the mountains and all you can see is clouds, like you're in an airplane. It's just this constant fluctuation of weather up there like that. And so that's kind of what kept happening. The clouds would come in to steal my view, and so I'd shut the phone off and kind of wait there. Then the cloud would lift, and then I'd keep filming. But I probably have, I don't know, 45 minutes of footage of this thing spaced out across, I don't know, 10 different videos. They're all kind of short videos just because there was no point to film if all I could see was fog, you know. But I was up there for a while watching this thing, and once it hunkered down, I couldn't tell what it was doing, but I would see what looked like an arm raise up every now and then. And so I just kept filming. I even actually was doing like whoops and making noise, trying to like spook it because I wanted it to get up and walk because I wanted footage of it walking. But it didn't seem to give a rat's about any of the noise I was making or anything. And I know it could hear me. It really does echo in that canyon. And I did have this weird, I don't know, like sense that this thing knew I was watching it, that it knew I was filming it. I don't know why, you know, I mean, I did. I had this just, it was almost like, not that I could sense that I believe, it was like I knew it knew that I can't explain it. It's really weird. And that, you know, like that went on for a while until eventually the clouds came in and just completely blocked the view till there was nothing I could see. And my wife, who was at my parents' house, my parents are about an hour away, 40 minutes away from where I was at. Everybody was waiting on me to get back for dinner. And I'd been out there way longer than I'd promised already at that point. And so, you know, once the clouds completely blocked out my view, and I just had to go. So that's kind of where that first encounter happened. And that's the story.
So
are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay,
no, I just let you go. So I got questions for you.
Sure.
The main question I think most people are thinking is, where can we see this 40 to 50 minutes?
Oh, how can you see it? Is that what you're saying?
Is it possible to see it, I guess?
Well, yeah, I have the footage. Yeah, I haven't posted anything yet. I've been accumulating massive amounts of video. I got a pile of micro SD cards, and I have tons of video from the research I've been doing. And I've been kind of waiting to release everything at once because my hope was to get like a phenomenal piece of footage that would kind of like propel my work, you know, like go viral or whatever, you know. And then through that piece of footage, I was hoping to steer anybody wanting to see more to my what will be a YouTube channel where I would have all this stuff. I'm horribly inept when it comes to tech. I've never even set up a Facebook. I you know, never was into any of that stuff back, you know, a MySpace or, you know, any of that stuff. I just didn't care about it. And so I'm so behind and out of touch with how you do all that, how you post things, you know. Like I recently downloaded Twitter or X or whatever for the first time in my life, and I barely even got on it, but maybe just a few minutes here and there. So that's the problem. Like, I don't want to just give my footage away and just let the world have it, you know, so I've kind of been holding on to it. But I do plan on making it public.
I think it's smart that you put the work in to set up a channel so that all your stuff can be in one area, and you don't just put it up on Facebook and then everyone posts it everywhere, right? So the good thing about YouTube now is as long as you have like a email address that you can access, you can log into, you can go to YouTube and you can set up a channel relatively easy. It's just having that email address that you use to set it up with.
Yeah.
So it's at the time to do it, right?
I just bought a laptop like 2-3 days ago. And I had one already, but it was an older one that had been collecting dust for so long that the batteries went bad on it. And so I just bought this laptop. Now I need to get somebody to help me, you know, get everything set up. And really with the footage I've accumulated so far, as far as the research that I've done following this sighting, I have some pretty amazing, like compared to what I'm seeing a lot of these other documentaries have.
Really?
You know, these guys that are out in the woods, you know, making documentaries about their Sasquatch hunting. And all I'm really seeing is some people sitting around a campfire, walking around the woods, talking about stuff. It's like really like I was researching for like 3 weeks and I had found 2 insanely awesome sites that are a bunch of upside down trees. You're probably familiar with what an upside down tree is.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. You said this was Oregon-Washington border that this happened?
Well, I don't like to say exactly where it happened, but yeah. That just gives people an idea of roughly where it is. It's close to the coast, and it's close to the border, which is the Columbia River, you know. So
You're right. That's awesome. Yeah, there's so many places over there that would be absolutely incredible. That just I know.
Oh, dude, this area is so just mind-blowingly meant for something like a Sasquatch. As soon as I started doing the research, like looking into this area, I just was blown away by the amount of berries. That was like one of the first things I noticed. So many species of berries, like every different kind of salmonberry, every different kind of blackberry. And then wild grapes and wild strawberries. And what was interesting this fall, because I was really paying attention to it, was as the berries are coming to an end, and still, I was just up there recently, and I was still finding berries that had just ripened, perfectly edible. But the explosion of wild mushrooms that I've been documenting, so it's almost like these creatures, you know, they lose their berries, but then immediately they just have this massive abundance of mushrooms. And I don't know that they eat mushrooms, but I don't know why they wouldn't. But and then also, like a few months ago, I was up in that area and I came across this river area with this deep pool, and a fish jumped, and I caught this picture on my body cam. I actually didn't even see the fish. It was later when I was looking at the footage. I caught this fish fully jumping out of the water on my body cam, but the fish jumped, so I went to go see, and I couldn't even count how many big steelhead were bedded down in this small creek. You know, just this area is just abundant with food. And they also have the option of going on a short walk to them, and they're at the shores of the Columbia River, where you can just dig and dig and dig, and you can fill buckets with clams, freshwater clams. They're horrible. I've tried to eat them. They're not good, but I mean, I don't know that a Sasquatch wouldn't enjoy them, you know, but it's food sources like that are everywhere, you know. And something we didn't get into about when I saw the Sasquatch, I came back the next day because we had better weather, and I drove up, climbed back up to the viewpoint, and immediately I had binoculars this time, and I immediately spot exactly where the Sasquatch was, and there was a stump there, a big old stump. I couldn't even tell there was a stump there the day before. I could just see the Sasquatch, which tells me its body is pretty big because it was completely blocking out the existence of this stump. And so then I started looking around at all these other stumps in this valley, and every stump in this valley has been tore apart, has been dug through, because there's particles and pieces of the stump strewn about all around these stumps, because you can see this red duff of the innards of the stump. And so that's, you know, to me, okay, so they're eating grubs out of the stumps. You know, that's always available that time of year when the bugs are hatching. And that's a pretty good protein source right there. And then they got the clams, which is a guaranteed no effort meal right there. You know, and so just things like that. And then obviously there's deer and there's elk and there's, you know, I got a video one evening of a porcupine walking right by me, you know, which is all of that is edible, you know. And I don't know that they would eat a porcupine, but they're probably smart enough to figure out a way to get past those quills, you know. I mean, there's just so much just food galore. I mean, it's really just a Sasquatch utopia up there. And there's a lot of bear up there. And bear, you know, I hear a lot of stuff that, you know, Sasquatch habitats are going to be, really favorable to bears and vice versa. And so that kind of makes sense, that they would both be omnivores, and they'd eat some of the same stuff out there. Do you want me to get into some of my discoveries, or do you have questions for me?
I was actually just going to kind of put us towards that direction. Yeah, if you don't mind sharing other things you may have captured on video, or you said you have some discoveries as well, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, dude, actually, this is something that I guess that we can talk about. Coincidentally, this morning, when I went to check my emails, you had responded, and I also got a response from this DNA company that I never in a million years thought was going to get back to me. Because I am confident that I have 2 different pieces of evidence that are just going to be covered in Sasquatch DNA. And I guess I could explain that story. So when I found the Sasquatch, I was hunting rocks, digging agates out of the mountain, and I see the Sasquatch. So I didn't care about rocks anymore. I just wanted to investigate Sasquatch. Bought a lot of gear, a lot of equipment, a lot of everything, and started trying to figure out how to get in and out of this valley, and, trying to investigate some of these rivers up there that are really hard to get to. This is all real rural area. I start investigating Sasquatch, and I start finding my way into the bottom of these canyons and the bottom of these valleys. And I'm alone. 99% of the time, I'm alone out there, which is a little nerve-wracking, especially when I first started doing it. It was more nerve-wracking. I've gotten a little more used to it after sleeping alone out there in the woods in a tent and doing a bunch of stuff alone. Kind of, if it's something you've never done before, at first it's a little intimidating, especially when that there's Sasquatches out there, because that, it wasn't that long ago that I wouldn't have even had that fear really going out in the woods by myself of a Sasquatch. But now that I know that they're actually out there, that's kind of you're looking over your shoulder a bit more, when you're all alone out there. You got bears and cougars, and now I know that there's Sasquatches. So anyway, as I'm getting into these valleys, getting into these canyons, I start finding rocks like I just never in a million years thought I would ever find. I'm talking agates bigger than my head. I just hiked out a 77-pound blue agate the other day. Just this huge, just beautiful agate. And I'm finding all these different kinds of rocks, like opals and crazy crystals, and just, I mean, it's like insane. Like I just couldn't even believe what I was finding. And I'm not out there looking for rocks, but then I'm finding them. So I'm getting these backpack loads of rocks, and hiking freaking rocks out of canyons is a nightmare. And I've been doing a lot of it. And so I started showing these rocks to other friends of mine and talking about them, and my older brother's friend's husband is a geologist. It's a weird connection to this geologist. It's actually his girlfriend's best friend's husband. And I've met him at some parties at their house a couple times and stuff like that. Cool guy. He's a geologist, and I sent him some pictures of some of the rocks just to identify what some of these rocks were. And, he told me what he could, by looking at the pictures. Oh, it's probably this, probably that, and he got excited, wanted to come out and wanted to see where I'm getting these rocks. He's not a Sasquatch guy. He's a rock guy. And so I agreed to take him out on a journey, and I warned him it's pretty brutal, and I took him through a 12.5-hour hike. But on the way to do the hike, it was probably like 6 a.m. This, months ago, it was daylight at 6 a.m. And we're entering my area, and I see 3 new huge arch trees, giant tree bends. And these are impossible to ever blame on Mother Nature. I'm sure people would try to blame them on Mother Nature, but I will just laugh at them. I do a lot of tree removal. One thing I know is trees and how they behave when they break and fall and get cut down. I mean, I'm as close to an expert on the subject as really anybody could ever claim to be. And so these tree bends are just monstrously, just insanely awesome for me, because I was wondering at this time period if the Sasquatch had moved out of that area because hunting season was coming in. And I had just kind of thought, yeah, they probably take off from here and go somewhere else because of all the hunters that come up in here. And this particular area where these tree bends is one of the first places I started investigating, and I called it Tree Break Alley. That was just a nickname I gave it because it was the first place I just started finding tree breaks all over the place. And so it was just kind of ironic that that's the area where they put these huge bends, giant bends. And like I almost took it as it was a message to me directly. You know, like, you think we're going to get chased off by hunters? You know, look what we're doing right in the opening week of bow and, you know, black powder season. These creatures came in and just do this insanely impossible feat, you know, right then when hunting season was just starting to pop off. And so I see these tree bends and I'm kind of freaking out, and the geologist is with me. He's aware of the whole Sasquatch thing, but he wasn't, you know, a big believer or whatever. He's like, I'm open-minded to it, dude, but I don't think that there's Sasquatch out here. You know, that was kind of his attitude. And we're up there for rocks, but I see these tree bends, so I pull over and I'm like, dude, you can sit in the car. I got to go look at these tree bends. And so I'm filming the whole time. I have sunglasses that are cameras. I have a body cam. I have a helmet cam. And those are just cameras just to record sort of the backdrop of everything, because then I have, you know, other cameras. I got, well, my phone, obviously. I do use my phone quite a bit, but I have like my long distance cameras for shooting. I can get footage a mile away with them, and I have way too many cameras. Anyway, so we're going down to the tree bend, one of these tree bends, and I'm videoing it and I'm documenting, because you could see this tree was bent down and wedged up against another tree, and you could see these crazy scrapes going up and down where they bent this tree and bent it into this way and wedged it up into this tree. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. The tree should have broke, or the roots should have popped up out of the ground, but they didn't. And these big old scars in this other tree, you know, and I'm documenting this and I'm talking about all of this. And while this is going on, the geologist catches up to me and he's looking at everything, you know, and kind of scratching his head. And then he goes, hey, look at this, you know, and I turn and he's holding this big old pine cone, right? He's a scientist, you know, he's a smart guy. And he's like, dude, don't you understand? Like, this isn't from these trees. Like, this is not a tree that is native to this area. This is kind of weird. And I'm thinking, you're looking at a pine cone thinking a pine cone's weird, like, when you got this giant impossible tree structure right above you, you know, but then I understand what he's saying. He's like, dude, this was directly under this bent tree and it had to have been brought here. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get what you're saying. So he's holding it, but he's being careful. He's just barely holding it with his like fingertips, and he hands it to me and I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, dude. And it looked like it had teeth mark in it. Like, I'm assuming that the Sasquatch may have actually stuck this thing in its mouth just to hang on to it or something while it was using its hands to do something else. It was holding this pine cone in its teeth. And so all that was documented on camera, the whole finding of this pine cone. And I put it in a plastic baggie and I kept this pine cone. And that day, he and I went on that hike. We went on a crazy journey. I mean, we started hiking at 7-something in the morning, and we went down to the bottom of this canyon, hiked this beautiful, insane river, found a bunch of rocks. I set up some game cameras, and then we had to climb out. And we didn't make it back to my truck till 8:30 at night. It was just getting dark. I mean, if we would have we could have been in a bad way. We luckily got out just in time, but it was in that hike I found so many different tree breaks. Like I've found so many different things that are not natural in this area. Yeah, it's gotten to the point where it's not even worth talking about them anymore. You know, like making another video of trees that have been topped when tree tops don't break very easily. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion that I'm actually making a video about right now, a series of videos about how rare it is for trees to lose their tops. Healthy green trees, tops don't break. Yeah, I'm finding areas where there'll be 15, 20 trees that have all lost their tops in 1 acre of forest. You know, it's just, it's really, it's almost impossible for a healthy green tree to have its top break. Wind can't do it. Snow won't do it. Lightning's the only thing that can do it. And yet I'm finding areas where something has gone through and just topped so many trees. And I'm finding these really crazy trail systems. And I've got footprint. I've found so many footprints too. I haven't cast any footprints because the forest floors out there, everything's so steep. So, and everything's pine needles and moss. And so the footprints you get out there, they're not like good castable footprints, but I have one in particular that's just amazing. You can see the big toe and the next toe where it cut through the moss and made this footprint.
Do you have a 3D scanner on your phone right now?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
What kind of phone do you have?
Oh, it's an Android. What is this thing? I think it's a Galaxy something. I don't know.
Okay, so you can get apps. For example, Android has one called Polycam, where you can use your phone to scan the actual footprint, and then you can see how deep down it goes, and you can just get like a whole viewpoint of it, and it's really cool. So I would look into that.
Yeah.
Yep.
That would be cool. And then when I do that scan, can it become recorded in like video format?
Yeah. So I know guys that they will do that, and then they'll put like their little videos from it inside their other videos, and they can share the videos with other people. And yeah, so I don't know about Polycam, but
I'd love to learn how to do that. There's so much stuff I need to learn how to do. It's so frustrating not having the tech skills I need. So when I got home, I put the pine cone in the freezer, and I started looking at comparisons to what this pine cone is. And I'm not, you know, I guess I could be wrong, but I looked at a lot of comparisons, and I'm pretty confident it's called a subalpine, you know, pine tree. And those are a really high elevation tree. And I looked into the maps of where they should be and where they grow, and there's none that should be in this area. And all of the trees in this area have all been planted by logging companies, and they're not going to plant subalpine there because it's not going to do well. It's probably not going to grow at all. And then I looked in further about the subalpine trees and found all this literature about all these uses that the Native Americans used to use those trees for medicines, for treating different ailments. Like, I mean, so much stuff. I couldn't believe how much there was about this tree, about how it was, you know, a major part of their medicines and stuff, the Native Americans. And so that was all pretty compelling and interesting, you know, and it was just strange, you know, that it appeared right there underneath the bent tree. But I didn't get to see how it was laying on the ground when the geologist found it. He found it and showed it to me. So the first time I saw it, it was in his hand. But then I want to jump ahead to my most recent trip up there. I took my son with me. He's 9 years old. And I've been up there by myself enough. I've kind of concluded, you know, that it's safe. And he and I were camping. I cut this road that had been overgrown for like a decade. and I cleared it. And I cleared about a quarter mile of this road with my chainsaws so I could drive in there and camp. I wanted to camp in a section of the forest that nobody's camped in a long time. But having my son there, I needed to have my truck nearby. And, you know, I wanted to bring enough supplies so it was comfortable for him. And if I would have been by myself, I could have just hiked into the woods and camped, you know, in some area way off the beaten path. But having my son with me, I had my generator and I had our big fancy tent and I had all kinds of crap just to create more of like a glamping type campsite for him. And so anyway, I cut the road out, made this really cool campsite, and he and I set out one day just to go do some Sasquatch hunting, investigating. And I took him to, when I mentioned the tree bends with the geologist, I mentioned that there was 3 of them. And the geologist and I only went and looked at one of them. And the other one I just saw from the road. It was a ways down in the forest. And, you know, we had another mission that day that was more important. We were trying to get into that canyon. So I didn't investigate the other one. So my son and I went to this tree bend and we're checking it out. And it's the same scenario. The tree is bent over in a very weird way. It's wedged up against another tree. And there's these big old scars going up and down that other tree where you can tell that it had to be like rubbed up and down and wedged, you know, as it was bent or formed into the way of which it looked. And so I'm filming this and filming that. And all of a sudden my son goes, "Hey, Dad, what's that?" And I turn around and I'm filming and I'm looking, and my son is pointing at the ground to one of those subalpine pine cones that was carefully and intentionally stuck in the mud. So it was pointing straight up to the sky. I mean, it was like, and luckily I caught all this on camera. Like it was all being filmed. And it was placed in this way that is just completely unnatural. Like a pine cone. Well, for one thing, pine cones this big, this type of pine cone just don't exist in this forest. I've never seen any like it. And I've spent a lot of time in our mountains and forests. I grew up in the mountains and forests around Packwood, Washington. I mean, I'm a mountain kid. Like I spent a lot of time in the forest, and I've never seen pine cones like this in our forest. In the way this pine cone was stuck in the mud, there's no doubt in my mind it had to have been done by hands, by coordinated hands that pressed it and stuck it in the mud. It just, there's no way it dropped, fell, got stepped on by a deer or something and got shoved into the, like it just, there's no way. It was perfectly placed, pointing perfectly straight up, intentionally put there directly underneath this tree bend. You know, and so I'm just like shocked, like it's another pine cone, you know, and this one, you know, didn't get touched by the geologist. Nobody's touched it. So I went up to my truck and got a plastic baggie and came down, and I even had my son video as I pulled it from the mud just to show, like, and you could tell by when I pulled it out of the mud that it had been in the mud a little while. It had a little bit of like mold that was growing around the edges of it. And as it pulled out of the mud, a bunch of mud like stuck to it, you know, was all clumped to it. It isn't like anybody that watches me remove that thing will know immediately that it isn't something I could have just done that day. Like you can clearly tell it had been there for a few weeks at least, just by the way it was when I removed it. And so I have these 2 pine cones, you know, that I know were put there by Sasquatch. Of course, people could debate that or whatever. And I've been wanting to figure out how I can move forward with getting these things tested or investigated or something. And I had sent a lot of emails out to different Sasquatch stuff, people. I've talked on the phone to a few people. You know, most people are just going to try this person or, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so I sent some emails out to some actual DNA labs. You know, figured most of them would just laugh. Well, this morning I got a response from one of them, and called himself Dr. something something from some lab somewhere, and he said he wants to set up a video call sometime this week to talk to me about, you know, what I have. And So I was pretty blown away by that. Like, wow, maybe this guy's a believer or who knows. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of that. I'm pretty paranoid and distrusting of people in general. So it'd be kind of hard for me to mail them off to some lab and just hope that they don't just get burned. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there, I guess. I was just pretty excited that somebody even gives a care. Do you want to hear more stuff about experiences?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, anything you'd like to share? I mean, this is some of the more. I mean, this is pretty. I think is pretty exciting stuff. And you're not saying the area, but any of the area that you're alluding to, I mean, yeah, it's awesome. So I would love if you have more to share. I'd love to hear it. Definitely.
Oh yeah, I mean, I got plenty, sure.
Right.
I mean, just the day, my son and I were up there camping for 4 days, 3 nights, and it was crazy. As we're leaving, he's getting pretty burned out on Dad's obsession with turning down every road and seeing something and running up into the woods with my camera and just seeing what I could find. And he's only 9 years old. He's the coolest 9-year-old on earth, and he's been the trooper of all troopers the whole time. No complaining. I'm taking him through some miserable stuff. Been a great kid, but he's definitely getting tired. He just wants to go home, And as we're driving out, we're almost off the mountain, and I'm like, you know what, dude, I've never checked this road out. And he just gives me this look like he already knows I'm doing it, so he's not giving me permission. He's just like, whatever. And so I turn down this road, and I see tree break. I see stuff. This area is, like I've said, just inundated with Sasquatch stuff. Like it's just mind blowing that this area isn't just like completely taped off and have scientists all over it. Like it's so abundant with Sasquatch evidence. And I turn down this little side road and I get out and my son gets out and he follows me and we're walking down to this tree line. And I pull out my phone and I start filming. And right then there's a sound, a Sasquatch type noise, that's somebody would probably say, oh, that's just an owl. But owls don't typically make noise in the middle of the day. This is like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, And I just right when I turned on the camera, there's a noise coming down from the trees. A weird whoop type hoop noise. And then another one responds off to the left, and it was awesome because I just turned on, actually haven't reviewed the footage, but that was just kind of cool. Like on our way out, something happened, that obviously could be debated whether it's Sasquatch or not, but I like to think it was. I like to think those creatures are actually watching me and messing with me quite a bit, to be honest with you. So that was just the super recent, most recent little thing that happened. But the very first time I figured out how to get into this valley, the valley where I was looking when I had that views point, I used an e-bike and I parked way over in a totally different area because I studied some maps and I saw that this might be a potential way to get in there. And it was. I had to go under a few gates and I had to ride my bike a good 8 miles or whatever it was. But it's an e-bike, so it's not. And I have cameras set up on my handlebar and I have cameras on like my helmet and cameras all over the place. And so I forget what camera for sure captured this, what happened, but it might be on 2 cameras actually. So I'm getting into the valley and I'm super, super excited because I'm like, okay, I'm actually in the valley. I don't know exactly where. I hadn't triangulated, precisely where I was, but I knew I was in the valley. And I'm coming down this road and I'm just getting this really like I'm excited, but I'm also kind of like nervous at the same time. And I'm like really starting to feel like I'm invading onto somebody's private property or something. And so I'm going slow and I'm just uneasy. I feel like eyeballs are on me. And all of a sudden, boom, it's like I just ran into a brick wall on my bike. I'm on the ground, laying there, like, what just happened? Like, it made no sense. I wasn't going very fast, so I wasn't like in too much pain. I mean, my leg was bleeding from the gravel, but it was just so crazy. I do have the footage of that, which shows me just casually, calmly riding a bike, and all of a sudden, boom, I wrecked. I mean, it made no sense. And at this point, I wasn't aware of how much stuff is out there that talk about how they can cloak and make themselves invisible. I really don't know. I don't know what to make of it. It was just really weird. And then I get up, get on my bike, I'm confused over what just happened. Like, how did I just wreck? But I couldn't make any sense of it. But bikes crash, who knows? And so I get on my bike and I'm riding up, and I get up into an area, and I do some investigating up in this area, and what I believe is a lookout point. Are you familiar with like Todd Standing's work at all?
Yes.
Okay, so are you familiar with the term he uses of a day watcher?
Yeah, I am. Yep.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure I find a day watcher spot.
Sorry, can you define it for people that might not be, though?
Todd Standing talks about what he's discovered a lot is what he calls day watchers, and those are sort of like a lookout point for the tribe of Sasquatches that finds a good, viewpoint, good vantage point, and they just watch all day long for threats or people or predators that might be moving in to their area. And so after I got into the valley and I parked my bike, I put my kickstand up and I parked my bike, and I left the camera rolling the whole time while I was gone, just to film whatever might come sneaking up the road behind me or whatever. And I climb up, and I'm always doing a lot of climbing. I go deep into the woods, and I climb through stuff that hunters don't go through, some pretty miserable brush and some really steep, nasty crap is basically what I'm always in. But I get up to this little viewpoint, and I can see where, spot after spot had been bedded down and bedded down and bedded down and bedded, like, all over that place. And there were feces, big old turds. And this type of dung didn't match the bear dung, because I'd been finding lots and lots of bear dung all over that area. Everywhere I go up in there, that time of year, you're finding mounds and mounds of bear all over the area. I'm very familiarized with bear dung, and it's super easy to spot that time of year because it looks like berries. All you see is berry seeds in the bear dung. And for some reason, this dung up on this weird lookout place where all these grass beds have been made from, I don't know if people are familiar with how animals will bed down and make, like beds in the grass. And you can spot them all the time where an animal has slept or just relaxed for hours upon hours. And this weird little shelf, this slope, that it wasn't like at the very top of the mountain, but it was a really good vantage point in that valley that you could look down and you could see in every direction, and just a really good lookout point. And it had 8, 9, 10 different spots where something had laid in the grass and bedded it down. And this dung that was all over the hillside just was so weird to me. It was almost like a cross between like big dog turds and human turds. Like, it wasn't anything like the bear. And I've since found this same dung elsewhere. And so, I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I believe that it is Sasquatch dung. And so I look for that when I'm out and about. And so I find this lookout point, and then I go back to my bike. Well, by the time I get back to my bike, it had been knocked over. it had fallen over. And I've reviewed the footage, and it did just fall over, which bikes do, they do just fall over. So I don't know if that was necessarily I crashed into a cloaked Sasquatch or not. I don't know if a cloaked Sasquatch came over and pushed my bike over, but it was weird. And then as I'm picking up my bike, and I wasn't doing any overnight or anything. This was all a one-day thing. I had to get back to my truck, so I was pressed for time. And I noticed that I was missing a bottle of Powerade that should have been in this little pack on the back of my bike. And I'm like, well, that's weird. Where'd that go? Okay, it fell out when I crashed. So I'm going back that way, so I'll pick it up on the way out. And so I cruised through, and I can't find that Powerade anywhere. It's just gone. And bear in mind, there's nobody driving around on these roads at this time period. These are all gated off. You can't get out there without a key. And nobody was up working, doing any logging. Nobody was driving in this area. And so the Powerade was nowhere to be found, which is really weird because any piece of garbage on that gravel road would have stood out, like a sore thumb. And then I drive down back. I'm heading back to my truck, but there was a bunch of places I planned on stopping at on the way out and investigating. And so I pull into one of them, and I go down this trail, and I find this beautiful swimming hole, and just this really amazing campsite. And Sasquatchy, just a beautiful spot. And I probe around, do what I can, and I actually found a big old agate. That was actually the first time, I believe that was the first time I found one of those agates, giant agates back in there. That's where the whole agate hunting back in there kind of became a thing. And so I'm going out to leave, and I get back to my bike, and I realize that my bear mace had gone. And I'm like, what the, how did my bear where is it? And so I'm thinking, okay, somehow it came off this thing and fell off. So I ride my bike back all through the area where I crashed. I ride all the way back up to where I'm below that, what I believe is a day watcher point. And it's just nowhere. I can't find the bear mace, and I can't find the Powerade. I still to this day don't know where they went. It was really weird. I don't know what the Sasquatch would do with my bear mace, but I don't know. And so I get out of there, no problems, nothing bad happens. And that was my first experience with entering the valley. The valley, it's what I call Sasquatch Valley. It depends on who you talk to. There's some people that say, oh, guaranteed that's Sasquatch. Someone else is going to say, oh, it slipped off your bike and fell into the ditch and you just didn't find it. And who knows? I can't prove either way, but it was really weird. I will say that. It was very weird, especially how much time I spent looking for these things to not find either of them. That's pretty weird. And I don't think it's even possible that they fell off and landed in the ditch line and wouldn't have been visible. I would have spotted them. It's really weird, and I do think they were picked up by something. Something with fingers and hands that can carry a bottle and carry a little canister. It's just really weird. So the next time I come out into this research area, it's I don't know, a couple weeks later. And I go back to that beautiful campsite that I mentioned earlier, and I go hiking across the river, and I take this little creek. Not little, it's a good-sized creek, I guess, small river. And I start tromping up this river. And I'm walking right in the middle of the river, pretty nervous going into this area. I know there's a lot of bear up there, and so I decided to walk in the middle of the river because I've spent a lot of time walking in rivers. It's kind of a skill that some people have and don't have. I'm just really good at walking over slippery rocks and walking through rivers and So I'm totally comfortable just walking right through the rapids. I just have some river shoes on and jump right up the middle of the river. That way I feel if a bear or something were to rush me, I'm going to see it rather than if I'm walking on the shoreline of the river where I'm right in the brush where a bear could easily just lunge out of the bushes and I wouldn't have much warning. So by walking in the middle of the river, it just gives me a little bit more warning of predators or anything kind of coming at me. But you do sacrifice any stealthiness. It's hard to be really quiet, tromping up the middle of a river. But it's hard to be quiet, period. No matter what you're doing in the woods, you're always making noise. It's so hard to be quiet in the Pacific Northwest woods. And so I'm working my way up this river, and I'm finding just mind-blowing agates all along the way. And then, I don't know, I'm probably about an hour into walking up this river, and I see off to the left, an upside-down tree, roots, way up in the air, and this is a big old log that's probably 15 inches wide, easily 15 inches wide, and the root ball up in the air. And I was just dumbfounded, okay, I came out here hoping to find a Sasquatch tree break or, find something. And to find an upside down tree, it just blew my mind, and then I'm staring at it from the river and I know exactly what it is and I'm filming it from the river. And so I go over there, I climb up this little embankment and I get up into this field and there's a bunch of them. I mean, I'm filming but a lot of them didn't have roots on them. And a lot of them actually had been cut by chainsaws, which, it's to be expected up there because you're talking, this whole area has just been logged over and over and over again. And so, I mean, if a Sasquatch is walking around picking up logs, more than likely they're going to pick one up that has been cut by a chainsaw at some point. And so some of these are actually pretty tall. I mean, some of these trees just sticking out of the ground or logs sticking out of the ground were, 30 feet up in the air. Some of them have roots. Some of them don't. Some of them are only 8 foot in the air, some of them, all different sizes. And some of them aren't sticking perfectly straight up. Some of them are kind of angled, sticking out different ways. But it was just amazing. Like I never thought that I'd be able to go back and show some of the naysayers in my life, pictures of upside down trees. And so as I'm walking through this field, and I'm filming, all this is being filmed, I find this area in the grass where something had been bedded down. And it seemed recent, it seemed like something could have possibly been actually laying there as I came into the field. So it made me kind of uneasy. And then I'm walking through the field and I'm, narrating as I'm filming trees. And I walk right into a pile of elk bones. There was an elk skull and, elk bones. It could be deer, but it just seemed like a bigger skull. If it was a deer, it was a pretty good-sized deer. But there wasn't any antlers. So it was probably a female deer or elk. But I do believe it was an elk by the size of it. And so that was kind of scary, So I didn't spend a lot of time there. I made the videos. I saw what I saw, and I got out of there and went back to the river. I don't know. I felt more safe walking up the river than being off in the bush in that weird little field. And so I went up and down the river that day and got a big old backpack of rocks out of there. And I've been back to that river many times. Then, a couple weeks ago, well, no, a couple months ago now, I went back to that same river, and I'm pretty sure I was by myself on this trip. I'm usually by myself, but I've brought people out. Yeah, no, I was by myself for sure. And I was hiking up the river, retracing a lot of the same footsteps I've already been across, kind of rock hunting, kind of Sasquatch hunting, just trying to be proactive in this weird endeavor that I've, taken up. And I passed my area where the upside down trees are, and I was planning on coming because I go up the river, then I walk back down the river. So I see everything twice the way I do this. And I was going to stop at the upside down trees and video them on the way back. So I just skipped right past them. And then I get to this area where there's the beginning phases of a beaver dam being built, and I thought, well, how cool is this? I could actually get some game cameras set up here and actually get, piece by piece by pieces, because beaver dams get huge. I've found beaver dams in the woods that were, 8 feet tall, huge dams. Sometimes they don't always get that big, but I was looking at the topography, the way the river and the way the valley's shaped, and this beaver dam could potentially become one of those monsters. And so I thought, well, that'd be really cool. I'm going to get some game cameras set up and get a record of how they build these things and, make a video about it eventually, because everything I'm doing is supposed to become stuff for my channel that doesn't exist that I hope to get built someday. And so I continue upstream, and I'm seeing all these areas that used to be just covered with foliage. And the beaver has eaten all the trees, chewed them all down, removed them, and he's building the dam with them. And then all of a sudden, off to my left again, more upside down trees, because I'd walked right past these things several times. You couldn't see them because they were all blocked by the green foliage off the shoreline. The beaver had cleared it all away. And so here's another site of upside down trees, and it was awesome. But these ones actually were smaller. There wasn't any like big, huge ones, but I mean, they're still pretty impressive. They're, I don't know, 15 feet in the air. I would say 8 to 10 inch logs with roots on it, stabbed into this ground. I mean, to dig in this dirt would be so hard because it's just river rock, like compressed river rock is all it is. So digging or stabbing a log into that ground, I mean, it just doesn't even seem possible. Even like, because I have post hole diggers for the work I do, when people hire me to build a fence or something like that, you break out a post hole digger, and if there's rocks, it's so hard to dig in it. I mean, your bit just bounces off of them, and it's a nightmare. Your wrists just get hammered trying to control it. Postal diggers are a nightmare, period. I've always hated running postal diggers, but I just don't even understand how anything could do this, could drive these logs into this river rock like they do. But I went over into this grassy area, and there was some more upside down trees over there. I think there was like maybe 5 or 6 in this area. They all seemed a little bit older than the main upside down tree area. In fact, there was one that I went up to, and it was old, and it was a small upside down tree. I mean, it was like maybe up to my chest, but it was a root ball up to my chest. And it wasn't a big fat log or anything, it was 5 inches or whatever. And I went up and just barely kind of touched this thing, and it broke and fell over. And it was just old decayed. I mean, that one possibly has been there for 20 years. I don't know. I have no clue, but old. And then I got down on my knees and dug in and looked at where the log is actually in the earth. And it was all very old. You could see dry rot had set in, and it'd been there. They'd been there a long time. Some of them obviously they've been there longer than others. But what I think, and totally just speculate on this, I think they have some kind of meaning, like maybe every now and then the new, I don't know, alpha that's in charge or something goes down there and drives something into the ground to signify, I don't know. They have meaning. I don't know for sure. It can't just be, I'm bored, so I'm going to just stick a log in the ground. Like, that doesn't really make sense. I do think there's some kind of message that has to do with why they do this.
Oh, I would agree.
But
Definitely. Yeah. It has to be. It's not just, whatever. But man, you have got some wild, wild stuff going on in your area. It is just crazy, Hugh.
Yeah, man, it's been pretty exciting. I mean, and what's crazy is I this actual Sasquatch investigation. It was the day before Father's Day that I had my sighting. So I'm not a math expert. How many months ago would that have been? Do you know off the top of your head? I can't even think what the date is.
What is Father's Day? June? Let's see. I think it was June. June 16th. So yeah, that's not long, dude.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was this Father's Day is when I had, it was the day before. It was a Saturday. And so, I mean, I haven't been at this very long. And I look at what I've already compiled, my evidence-wise, and then I go and I watch people's channels that have been around for years and years and years. And, like, I mean, I'm not trying to toot my own horn or whatever, but it's like, dude, in a few months, I've uncovered better evidence than what people have been finding in, many, many years of doing the research. And this area, like, everywhere I go, I find Sasquatch stuff. Like about a month ago, I can't remember, I was visiting my parents and talking about the stuff I do, because my parents live in the area of where I research. I mean, I wouldn't say in the area, but it's not that far away, from where they live. So when I had the sighting, my very first sighting, the day before Father's Day, I went right to my parents' house after the sighting to have dinner. That's where my wife and kids were at, and that was what I was scheduled to do. And I'm telling them, at first I wasn't even going to tell anybody, because I've had some weird stuff happen. I've had UFOs. I've had paranormal things happen to me throughout my life, and nobody believes you. Nobody believes you when you tell them about these things. And so I was really debating whether or not I was even going to tell them about the Sasquatch. Didn't want to have people roll their eyes, and then I really hate it when people pretend to believe you just to talk about you behind your back, like, oh, he's crazy, and so the whole drive home, I was debating whether I was going to tell anybody or not. And then I get to my parents' house, and, my wife probably saw a weird look on my face or something, and she's like, what's going on? And I'm washing my hands, and I'm all filthy dirty because I've been breaking rocks all day. And so I just tell her, like, and what's crazy about me seeing the Sasquatch is the night before, I was talking to my parents about some of the videos, of the close-ups that Todd Standing provided from the faces of the Sasquatches, because a lot of people don't know that those exist, whether you want to believe they're real or not. But a lot of people have never even seen Todd's videos. He's not really very well known when you compare his footage to, like, the Patterson Gimlin. Like, everybody's seen those Patterson Gimlin footage, but not a lot of people have seen Todd Standing's footage. And so it's just crazy, because the night before I went up to do the rock hounding, I was talking about Todd Standing's videos and about the Sasquatch faces. And then I go up the next day and I'm rock hounding and I see a Sasquatch. So then when I come back home, it was just really weird to be coming back and being like, yeah, I saw a Sasquatch today, after just the night before talking about it. The whole thing was just really weird. And so as I'm telling everybody about the Sasquatch that I saw, my dad, who's never had anything paranormal happen to him in his life, he doesn't believe in anything, everybody's lying, everybody's a fraud or whatever. And he goes, oh, yeah, come to think of it, a couple years ago, I was up on such and such road up in the mountains, and I saw human footprints in the snow.
Oh, wow.
And Yeah, and I'm like, Dad, how have you never mentioned this to any of us? Oh well, I just figured it was just a hunter. And I'm like, Dad, a hunter walking around in the middle of the winter in bare feet in the snow? Yeah, well, I don't know. I thought maybe he was just camping and maybe just left his camp to go take a piss or something. I'm like, Dad, like he goes, but they weren't huge. They weren't, size 18s. He said that the footprints were comparable to his size. And that's when I'm like, well, Dad, there are different size, footprints for creatures. They got to grow, in order to get big. So anyway, so that was just kind of crazy, that my dad mentioned the, finding human footprints in the snow. And that was on a different mountain than my research area. But I know how to get to the area where he found the footprints. And I actually have gone through that area. I spent the day up there and I found phenomenal tree breaks. And then I went into the forest where those tree breaks were at with my dog. I have a three-legged dog. She lost her rear leg when she got ran over. And she goes out a lot with me and does a lot of researching with me. But I'm limited on what I can do with her because if she hurts one of her legs, it's a big problem. I'd have to carry her. But anyway, me and her, we go into the woods underneath these tree breaks, and I find a pile of bones in there, just like the pile of bones that I found at the Upside Down Tree place. It's just kind of creepy because typically bones kind of get scattered around, just by animals, by nature. When you find them piled in the woods, it's just kind of creepy. It almost seems like they're put there intentionally, and they're not always. I mean, they just kind of end up together when the animal decomposes. But it was just creepy. I'm following some tree breaks, into the woods in the area nearby where my dad found the footprints, and just find a pile of bones. And so that's really all I know about that area where my dad found the footprints. That's a whole nother wilderness that I would love to spend more time in and do more research in. I just haven't. But so anyway, now we're talking about my dad. So I'm at my parents' house and I'm talking about my findings and what I'm doing. And my dad mentions this area that you can drive into because that's a big deal. Like a lot of these areas that I'm researching, you can't drive into them. You have to have keys for these gates. And so it's kind of cool when you can go to these spots and actually drive through them in your vehicle. And so my dad, used to work for logging companies up in that area and driving logging trucks. He was a truck driver. And so he knows a lot of cool spots up there. And he wanted to show me this area. So we drive out there. It was my dad, my wife, and me. I think, yeah, it was just the three of us that day. And he takes me up through this wilderness, and we're driving around all day and going down random roads. And we go to this really amazing area that puts you right on this beach at the Columbia River, real private area, right on the beach. Big, huge, like Palisade cliffs are right there. Just an awesome area. And I'm checking the sand like crazy for footprints because it was really good sand for footprints, and I'm not finding anything. And I've been all over this wilderness all day looking for a tree break, looking for something. Couldn't find anything. I mean, and I kept saying that. It's like, God, it's so weird. Like, this area just has no Sasquatch sign whatsoever anywhere. And then we're driving out, and I don't know, we're pretty far from where we were at the river. We're almost getting back to where, people live. And off to the left, there's this little side road, and there was a tree that was kind of arched in a weird way. It just kind of caught my eye. And I'm like, you know what? I just want to check this road out. I'm just curious about something. I turned down this road, and instantly, like all of it, even my dad, who I don't know if he's even a believer, despite everything that's happened, he still probably a doubter, but he pretends to be a believer around me. I don't know that he is a believer, but my wife, and I think she's a believer now, but she's been a skeptic of a lot of stuff I've experienced. Like, she pretends to believe it, but I think she just doesn't really know what to think, because people that have never had experiences like this, they just don't really even know how to, I don't know, how to even think that this stuff could possibly be real. But so we're pulling down the road. I got two skeptics really with me, and instantly this entire road was arch trees after arch tree after arch tree, arches across the road. So we're driving underneath these trees, and these trees are all about as big around as like my forearm, maybe a little thicker, some a little smaller. But something had taken every single one of these trees, and these are maples, and bent them into arches across the road. So as you're driving through, you're going under all these arches. And then you look to the right, and there would be a tree break that had been bent over and broke. This whole road, and this road goes for about, I don't know, roughly a mile. And the entire road was just tree breaks and bends and arches. I mean, it was just so weird that there was nothing in this area. And then all of a sudden I turned down this one road, and it's just like a Sasquatch playground. And a lot of the tree breaks were old, dried up, old, like multiple years old. And then some of them looked like they were so fresh they could have happened that day. And then before the road ends, I look off to the left, and there's like a creek probably that comes in. It looked like a canyon. And I get out and I go look, and something had taken these trees. And these trees are like 80 feet tall, but they're just really skinny, like beanpole-like trees. I don't know that they're fighting to get light or whatever, so they just stretch out like crazy. But something had actually taken 3 of these trees and bent them into each other and made an arch where the roots were on each side, and then they had been twisted and almost braided into each other. Like, and I videoed all this. I have video of all this. And it's just this impossible arch where the trees are just going up, under. I mean, there's no way a windstorm, a tornado, a hurricane, we don't get any of those in the area that I'm in anyway. But they do get heavy wind, really heavy wind from time to time out there. But there's just no way anything could have done this without coordinated, intentional fingers. And so that was just a really interesting thing, because it's almost like anywhere I go up there, I'm gonna find super significant Sasquatch evidence. I mean, it's just everywhere I go, there it is. Like, some of it's more vague than others, but this whole entire area, I don't know if it's one big tribe of them or if it's, multiple tribes. It's a big area, but it's just inundated with it. And when I found this particular road that I'm talking about with all the arches, it seemed like we were a good 30 plus miles away from my main research area. And so at that moment, I thought, well, this has to be a different tribe of them, because these tree breaks are a little different than the ones that I'm finding in my area. They just kind of had a different style to them in a way. But then when I actually pulled up the maps and really looked at, the layout, the topography and everything, it was only about 10 miles away, as the crow flies, which would be probably like 14 miles if you were to actually hike it, going up and down the canyon walls and stuff like that. So it's not impossible that the same Sasquatches are covering the same ground, but yeah, I don't know how far they, would migrate or what they consider a just a stroll through the woods would be. Is that 20 miles or 2 miles? You know, I have no idea.
Oh, I mean, it's got to be, I would think, a ton of miles. But, man, Hugh, I feel like we're probably going to talk. I would love it if you would keep me up to date with what's going on.
A follow-up episode might be a really good idea because I currently have, I think, 15 game cameras in this area.
Holy mackerel, really?
And yeah. And actually, no, it's like 11. I forgot. I got a couple in my rack.
That's still pretty awesome.
Yeah. And I got some big plans actually because it seemed to work last time on enticing them into my camp, and I'm gonna really pursue that. So I probably will have some pretty cool follow-up stuff pretty soon.
That's awesome, Hugh. Yeah, definitely keep me in the loop with what goes on in your area up there for sure.
I do have footage of what I believe is a face of a Sasquatch looking at me, but I couldn't get the camera to focus on it. And I was in a canyon on the slope. It was super sketchy. And then I also have another footage that was right at sundown, and I couldn't get the camera to focus. And so I tossed that camera aside and pulled out another camera. And by the time I got it up, there was nothing there.
Oh, man.
And another piece of footage, I got black blobs in a shrub that seemed to be moving, but I could, you know what I mean? So I have a lot of like maybe Squatch footage, but it's just, I want that $1 million shot that'll blow up, you know?
I would recommend to just put it all up. Seriously. Put it all up. People can, I mean, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of like really technical people that can they might be even able to help clear up stuff. But I would just put it all up because people love watching your journey as well. That's a huge deal. Absolutely, Hugh. Thanks again for coming on and for chatting.
Yeah, man. I'll look forward to talking to you again when I got some big news.
You got it. Talk to you later.
All right, man. Bye. Take care. Bye.
Just want to take a few minutes to say thank you to you, all my listeners, for listening to the podcast. Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list. The Subtle Lake area of Oregon, Rainbow, Oregon, McKinsey Bridge area, Sweet Home, pretty much that entire area, the north part, if you get what I mean. I'll see you back next time, listeners. Sasquatch Summerfest this year, July 11th through the 12th. It's going to be fantastic. July 11th through 12th in Green Waters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. And listeners, if you're going to go, you can get a 2-day ticket for the cost of one. If you use the code BFS, like Bigfoot Society, but BFS, and it'll get you some off your cost. Priscilla was nice enough to provide that for my listeners. So there you go. I look forward to seeing you there. So make sure you head over to www.sasquatchsummerfest.com and pick up your tickets today.